This is the beginning course and an introduction to chemical makeup within our body and their exchanges that occur. Uh, we start out in the simplest of forms of the understanding of the atoms and the basics understanding of atoms, and then the chemical compounds and the relationships to each other, inorganic and organic compounds. Um, the chemical reactions in our body which maintain our homeostasis, the breaking down of tissues, and the elimination of waste, and the chemicals that are expelled during this process. We take in chemicals, we break them down, we use the individual elements to build structures and to nourish our bodies, and we expel waste, which is eliminated. So there's a lot of chemical processes which occur. So it's just a moment, we'll just get started here. Uh, Chemistry is a certainly an important part of life, and it is occurring all the time within our cellular level, within our body systems. And as discussed earlier, in the simple matter of breathing and respiration, we are doing chemical exchanges of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Um, Matter, it has weight, it has substance, it takes up space. But it can be extremely light. It doesn't have to have a lot of weight to be matter. It can be, as you can see, it's in a gaseous form as stated on this slide. And gas floats in our atmosphere. Now, matter and energy have a relationship. As you see, uh, ability to work matter into motion. The same amount of matter can have different amounts of energy. And so you represent different states of matter. Um, for example, if you, let's say you had an ice cube, okay, and you melted and you made it into water, you added energy to it, okay. Now that energy was, it had matter. Uh, the matter has been changed or altered to water. Um, if you add even more energy to it, it becomes a vapor or steam. Um, the kind of matter is the same, and the amount of matter is the same as the original cube, but there's more or less energy. The energy is altered or changed. So either you have more energy or less energy, but you still have the same amount of matter. Um, it's an interesting way of putting at it. The way things are coming with physics is that physics is interacting to our biochemistry and our biology. And a lot of new concepts are being occurred in relationship to our matter and energy definitions and the way that biology is looking at things. For example, photosynthesis. You take a proton, a photon, a photon, uh, and its energy is altered into a sugar molecule or starch to be used and stored as energy for the plant. Now that's an alteration of matter. Uh, in in physics, I just got to tell you, you're not altering the matter. The matter stays the same. But in the old teachings of photosynthesis, you end up having glucose or sugar for the plant, or starches, are being stored as energy. So it's an alteration of a photon. But actually, that is not a concept that is being well understood. Um, it's not that. It's that basically the photon seems to cause an energy response within the plant's system to adenosine triphosphate, to allow for a sugar to be built or made. So that photon is still somewhere. It's not gone. It's still existent. We just haven't figured out where it went. So there's a lot to understand about the marriage of physics with biology, And I think it's a time that would be well spent in the sciences from all the journals I've looked at. I think it'll be a great moment for us, and then we'll understand biological chemistry a lot better. And I hope that that occurs the sooner uh, than later. So here we're going to the next slide. An atom is the smallest unit of an element. Now, and the way I say that is to let you know that an atom is not the smallest possible item. An atom is made of subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, and electrons. So if I had a hydrogen uh, atom, it has one electron and one proton, neutrons for its core. So it's 1 to 1, and the carbon has 4 electrons and 4 neutrons for the center. So an, a hydrogen atom is probably one of the smallest elements that we could have. Now, with that being said, to understand the relationship of electrons to its protons and neutron core, you have to visualize that a hydrogen atom, and in proportion to its distance, if I was a hydrogen atom and I was, let's say, the proton, which would be in the core of the atom, the center part, and I was stationary, that electron that was circling me would be about 3 houses down the street. And that's 3 yards, maybe 250 yards away from me. So if you think about it, although these things are tiny, but in relationship to each other, there is quite some distance if you measured it proportionally to their size. Now, isotopes are a very unique thing. They are atoms of an element, the same element as chlorine or carbon or hydrogen. So they are the same element. They're either, of that particular element. Um, but they have the same number of protons. Individual atoms may have different numbers of neutrons. So although their proton number is the same as the element in carbon, their neutron number is different. Now, their electrons are still the same number. So if I'm a carbon and I'm an isotope, I'm going to have 4 protons in my center. Let's say I have 3 neutrons with those protons, and I'm going to have 4 electrons circling me in the outer sphere of me. So as you can see, I'm not 4, 4, and 4. I'm 4, 3, and 4. That makes me an isotope. So that kind of helps you understand the differences between these subatomic particles and why some are less reactive than others. The less reactive ones are more closer to normal. So if I was a carbon atom and I was 4, 2, and 4, I would be more reactive than an isotope that was 4, 3, and 4. So the more closer to normal, the less radioactive I am. So it's an interesting field of study, but the life expectancy, as you can see, could be detrimental in studying radioactive isotopes. Um, that's just to be a commonsensical way. All the protection you could ever have, there still is much to learn, and it's in my mindset, it's something that I would avoid, to be very truthful. So let's go to the next slide. Here we have the structure of a single atom. This atom is unique. It has 8 electrons circling its center mass of 8 protons and 8 neutrons, which is making this an oxygen element. Uh, so What is unique about this is that it means it has an intervalence shell and an outer valence shell. What that means is that the orbiting of the electrons are 2 to 6. You have 2 in an inner orbit, which is a valence orbital circumference on the inner side of the orbit, closer to the mass of the 8 protons and 8 electrons, 2. And then there are 6 other electrons in an outer valence um, orbit outside of that. And in order for that to be complete, it needs 2 more. You could have 2 more. Now, this is just an understanding of how chemistry can allow for elements to respond to each other. This means that the outer shell of the oxygen is not quite happy. It won't be happy until it has 8 electrons on its outer shell. It currently does not. So it's seeking, will always be seeking for 2 more, so it can be chemically responsive to other elements and link up and join them, forming different kinds of compounds. Now that's how chemistry works, is that they're filling up that outer shell to be happy. Now hydrogen has only one atom in its inner valence shell, and it wants to have 2. Remember we're talking about 2 is in the inner side of this oxygen atom, and the 2 on the inside, it's happy, and it doesn't need any more help. It's got its 2, and so the other 6 electrons had to be on the outer side of their valence shell, and it needed 2 more to become 8. So there's an inner shell, and once it gets 2 electrons uh, circumferencing the mass in the middle, it's happy. And then other electrons have to go to the outside, and they have to get to 8. And when they get to 8, they'll be happy. They're not going to want to change or interact with anybody. So helium, which is a very, very stable element, has 2 electrons, and it has an inner cell, and it doesn't like to react with anything. So helium stands alone and pretty much is happy. It doesn't need any more help. So that helps you kind of understand why elements interact in a chemical way with each other and join up and form chemicals. So we'll go to the next slide. On this slide, you have various diagnostic capabilities from different types of equipment. Um, and I think it's a good slide, and there's not too much you could add to what's before you. It tells you pretty much the CAT scan, and it does cross sections of the body, and CT scan, and the MRI, visualization of fluid and soft tissues, and you have the PET. It's a newer technique. It allows visualization of the metabolic processes. Um, you have bone, liver, brain, and spleen scans. The sonograph, which is like an ultrasound, it uses sound and usually used a lot in monitoring the fetus in the womb. And a mammogram is identification of lesions in the breast. Uh, all these are just basic tests that are done in the hospitals to determine and diagnose suspected problems with the patient. Electrolytes are very important in maintaining our muscular tissue levels activity. Um, the the electrolytes are, as it says here, they're charged particles. They're particles within our liquids that can carry a charge, and it's based on an acid-base balance. So one of the things you understand that what we have in the body is we have numerous electrolytes, and some of them are sodium, potassium, calcium, um, bicarbonate, and magnesium, chloride, phosphate. Um, the thing that I like to talk about when I get this to a student is I talk about the calcium levels. Many students are not aware that calcium is extremely important for muscle function, especially our heart. Uh, if the heart has ample calcium, uh, it will beat at a normal rate. But if it has, if it has too much or too little, it will certainly change its heart rhythm. Now, what calcium does is it gives you the force that the heart will pump. So if my fist is the heart and it's pumping like so, and I increase the calcium, it's going to go boom, 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 and get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And what happens when that happens is that I'm not allowing my heart to refill up with blood, so I'm actually working harder, but I'm pumping less blood, and I have a hypertension occurrence. My blood drops, and I might pass out because I'm not circulating enough blood efficiently enough because I have a calcium overload. Now, it's true if you don't have enough calcium. If you don't have enough calcium, then your heart will beat, and its strength of the beat will not be as strong. It won't be as forceful. So you're pumping, but you're not pumping with any kind of force to move the blood to the vascular system, and you'll have edema form up perhaps in your legs and in certain distal areas away from your torso, so or your thorax. So and that occurs, then you're going to have poor oxygenated blood, stagnant blood, and that is also very detrimental. And it usually causes a high blood pressure, the opposite. And the thing is that's because there's a large volume that hasn't been circulated through the kidneys to extract the excess water because the force is not forceful enough to get a proper circulation in the body. So that's just one example of having an electronic imbalance. And so you can see it's very important that we eat our fruits and vegetables and take our vitamins. And you don't want to overdo it because too much is bad and too little is bad. So you want to be just right. Now remember, your body is designed to expel any minerals and nutrients, most of them, that you don't need. So it's usually very hard to get an excess amount of something that's not going to be expelled before it's a problem. But that's due to the mechanisms our bodies are designed to protect itself. Um, so this should help you very much in understanding electrolytes. Now in the hospital you see them hanging these bottles of fluids, and the one that most common is normal saline, which is basically the normal electrolyte balance that we have in our bodies every day, and it's basically to keep the patient hydrated, which is very important. So this should help you understand why electrolytes and how they work. All living things are composed of one or more cells and are the products of those cells. So cells begot cells. The chemical compounds that make up the structures in cells are mixtures of organic compounds and inorganic compounds. To make it kind of simple, organic compounds always contain carbon and hydrogen, and maybe some other elements with that, but mostly carbon and hydrogen. Inorganic compounds do not contain carbon and hydrogen together in the same chemistry. So it may have carbon, but it won't have hydrogen. Or it may have hydrogen, but it won't have carbon. And this can help you separate between your inorganic and organic compounds in a chemical way. Now you notice your organic compounds are nucleic acids, uh, they're proteins, your lipids, your sugars, such as starches, are in this group. An example of an inorganic compound is, as you can see, is water and carbon dioxide. Uh, the one given on this slide is salt, sodium chloride. So as you can see, in neither one of those, water doesn't have carbon, and nor does sodium chloride. It doesn't have hydrogen. So you can see how it works out. Uh, so we go on to the next slide. What you have here is carbohydrates, which is a form of a sugar. It's used for energy. And then you have lipids, which is a complex folded over larger chain of carbohydrates. And proteins are larger than the lipids. And they're folded on each other and they form a shape to make them a protein. And lipids are formed to a certain shape to make them a fat. It takes energy to unwind either one of them to form a carbohydrate, which can be used for energy. So uh, what happens is that in these large chains, you take what we call a hydrolysis reaction that breaks down and unwinds these chains so they can be used for energy. A dehydration, hydrolysis reactions are similar for all micromolecules, but which is what a lipid and protein are. They require an investment of energy for new bond formation, and while hydrolysis reactions typically release energy by breaking bonds. So this is a way of releasing energy as well. Nucleic acid is the largest organic molecule. It's formed by a structure with a helix, a double helix, like a twisting of two. I don't know if you've ever seen the model for DNA, but what it is a double helix, and it's a rather large molecule. Now, enzymes are biological molecules or proteins that significantly speed up the rate of virtually all of the chemical reactions that take place within the cells. They are vital for life, absolutely vital, and serve a wide range of important functions in the body, such as aiding in digestion and metabolism. So enzymes trigger events and cause events to occur rapidly. And like I said, the shape begots function. The shape of the enzyme interacts to the chain that it desires to have an action, and it fits. And when that occurs, it speeds up the whole process. So that's pretty neat the way enzymes work, and they are anything from insulin to testosterone, hormone secretions, pepsid, which is another one, which helps digestion. There's a lot of numerous amount of proteins that are considered enzymes that are very effective within our bodies. So it's very important, and it's a science in its own right. It's a very interesting subject area is enzymes. So we go on to the next one. DNA contains deoxyribonucleic nucleic acid, um, and is important. It transfers our genetic makeup from cell to cell, and pretty much makes us who we are in relationship to our parents. So it's double-stranded, and its purpose is important because without DNA we could not make certain proteins. Now the reason why I bring that up is that DNA has a relationship with a thing called RNA, which is ribonucleic nucleic acid. Uh, and the differences between them is that the DNA is a double-stranded molecule, where an RNA is a single-stranded molecule. Um, DNA is stable under alkaline conditions, so RNA is not. Um, DNA and RNA perform different functions in humans. Like I said, DNA is responsible for storing and transferring our genetic information, while RNA directly codes for amino acids, which are proteins, and acts as a messenger between DNA and ribosomes to make these proteins. And many of these proteins that it makes are enzymes. And enzymes are extremely important in the cell. So we have this DNA molecule floating around in our cells in relationship that it splits because of an alkaline environment, and we get an RNA chain that bounces off and forms an amino acid, which is the basis of a particular enzyme that cell will secrete out into our bloodstream. So it's important to understand the relationship of our DNA and RNA and how they work together and their differences. RNA uses adenine, uracil, cytosine, and quinine. And you notice that uracil is not listed on this DNA illustration because uracil is not used in DNA. But it's one of the other differences between RNA. But the importance is that when this DNA link opens up and forms singular strands, it forms an RNA chain that codes for a protein in which is secreted into the blood cell, either as insulin or some other essential protein needed to form an enzyme reaction. So that's pretty much concludes this lesson. And I am going to there's one more slide, so we'll be right to that in just a second here. As I said earlier, that concludes this lesson. But you should be aware that if you have any questions, there are numerous resources for you to select from. You can contact your primary instructor by obtaining the contact information from the Blackboard prompt labeled Faculty Availability. There's the Cengage, which has the book embedded in it, and a dictionary and a glossary, with a search prompt that can be used to obtain information about certain subject matter concerning this subject area. And then there's the UMA library, which is also available to you, and is very extensive and has every subject matter you could think of, and I would highly recommend that as a resource. It's certainly more flexible, and it has ready references, videos, as well as text material. So it was great having this lesson with you today, and I'm wishing you guys the best. Take care.